Hey, I'm Deke Weaver. Me too. I'm Deke Weaver too. I'm a writer, performer, theater artist, designer, and video maker. And I'm making a lifelong project called The Unreliable Bestiary, a performance for each letter of the alphabet, each letter represented by an endangered animal or habitat. The next performance we're working on is we need your help to make it. Here's a couple of things that we've already done. On Darwin's 200th birthday, we opened Monkey. We opened Monkey in a black box theater, but other performances are taking place in sites that are specific to the animal's story. In 2010, we did Elephant. Elephant was huge. There was giant projections, dance, songs, storytelling, an enormous elephant puppet. In 2013, we did Wolf. Wolf took people on a 40-minute bus ride, walked them through the woods at sunset, leading to a barn that was filled with video, dance, songs, and storytelling. Bear in 3 parts. It's almost always about transformation, so I've been doing some transforming of myself. The Sundarbans is made up of shifting islands and a who's who of poisons, predators, and dangers. Insane tidal currents, snakes, 30-foot crocodiles, sharks, pirates, and a population of tigers that are basically aquacats. They hunt, they fish, they live in a swamp, right? And they eat people. They've been eating people for hundreds of years. The tigers of the Sundarbans are unlike anything I've ever heard of. And they are here, on this planet, right now. Bestiary is made up from a great group of collaborating artists, designers, and performers. A lot of these brilliant people have worked on other bestiary performances. We've all been writing, building, recording, rehearsing, composing, molding, gluing, and plotting. We're creating an experience that will only happen for 5 days. It's rare, it's curious, it's unique. A performance for every letter of the alphabet, each letter represented by an endangered animal or habitat.
On the surface, it seems like this is going to be all about animals, but once you get into the show, you realize pretty quickly that it's about us. It's about how we're connected to the animals, but more importantly, how the animals, how we are, how we make up this natural system, how we make up these life cycles. And so that's what ends up happening within these shows. It's like the animals are sort of a barker in front of the carnival tent, getting people inside. So the last one I did of these was Tiger in 2019. And last show I did was March 6th, 2020. So a week later we shut down. And usually after these things, they take a lot of research. They take a lot of time raising money to put them together. And so it'll take like 3 years putting these things together. And a lot of times when I'm reading all this stuff, it's pretty dark, you know, and so it's not it's not invigorating. So a lot of these shows are about trying to figure out ways of getting people to not feel like they're having their head hammered, you know, like it can all feel a little doomy. So trying to get away from that. But reading it is sort of like want to take a break, and sometimes with these things I wonder, like, do I really want to keep working on this? Kind of exhausted. But I started reading this book, and amazing. This book was amazing, and it's set me up on a whole lot of other books. And Fathoms, The World and the Whale, Rebecca Gates, great book, really cool. A lot of stuff in there. One of the things, well, let's just start, like blue whale, biggest whale on the planet, that's the big one up there. Can get over 100 feet long. Even bigger than the dinosaurs, biggest ever. And when a baby blue whale is born, they're usually around 23 feet long. They weigh between 1.5 to 2.5 tons, brand new baby. Woo! They put on 10 pounds an hour because their mother's milk is so rich. That's 250 pounds a day. That's a big baby. Next one is a humpback whale. So if you hear a whale recorded, you know, that musical whale sound, that's only one kind of whale. It's a male humpback whale. All the other whales don't really sound like that at all. They're called the long-winged New Englander because their flippers are so long. Next one is an orca, the biggest dolphin on the planet. They can get over 30 feet long. They're the top, apex predator. Nobody beats them. They eat everybody. Sperm whale. Okay, sperm whale washed up on a beach in Spain. It died. They cut open its belly. In its belly, they found an entire greenhouse, fully equipped. Had hoses, had plastic tarps, plastic sheeting, had a bunch of flower pots, had a little bit of a mattress, had a bit of a bicycle, all inside this big sperm whale. Now, when a whale washes up on a beach, it can be a big problem for the small beach community where this is happening, because all of a sudden they got 35 to 75 tons of rotting flesh on their beach. Do they pay for the removal? Does the feds? They don't know. Becomes even more complicated when you realize that the blubber of the whale concentrates the toxins that we've been dumping into the environment for decades. Now, even though something like DDT might have been banned in the late 60s, early 70s, it's still circulating in our natural environment, our natural systems. These are things called persistent organic pollutants, POPs, also known as forever chemicals. So they're getting concentrated in whale blubber over the life of the whale. So when a whale dies, it's on the beach, it's literally a toxic waste dump, a Superfund site. So in Greenland, Inuit communities have been eating beluga whale for centuries. But over the last 25 years, they started to warn Inuit women, especially those who are pregnant or nursing, to stop eating beluga, because the toxins from the beluga are getting concentrated in their milk. Saying goes that if the milk was being transported in any other container other than her body, other than her breasts, it wouldn't be allowed to cross state lines because it's so toxic, so poisonous. So we've come to this point in human history where what used to be the definition of innocence, the definition of purity, mother's milk, is suddenly something that will kill you. This little guy walked up on a beach in July 2022, last summer. Wasn't doing so good. He had a couple holes in his shell, missing a flipper. They took him to the zoo and the doctor there. And for 6 days, this little sea-herded turtle shat nothing but plastic. The only thing coming out of his body for 6 days was plastic. So again, these things that we've relied on, that we've taken for granted, that you're going to be able to drink pure water, breathe clean air, that the environment's going to feed you, it's starting to stop in some places. But that's in Australia, right? I mean, here we are in the middle of the country. It's about, from here, it's probably like a 13 or 14-hour drive down to New Orleans, down to the Gulf of Mexico. Another 12-hour drive out to Virginia and the beaches out there. So what do we have to do with oceans? What do we have to do? So if you look right there, that's a Mississippi, right? Mississippi River. So everything that is running out of our houses, running up our streets, running up our lawns, our fields, it's all draining into the sewers, into the streams, into the rivers, down into the Mississippi River, right? And then it's going all the way down to New Orleans. That squiggly line in the middle there, that's to the right is Louisiana, to the left is Texas. There's the Gulf of Mexico, and all that red is called the dead zone. This is an area of the ocean where there is not really any oxygen, and where, so not much lives there. It's a fluctuating area. This was shot in the summer of 2021. At this point, it's about the size of the state of Connecticut. But it's not just the mouth of the Mississippi where all the toxins from the belly of our country are rolling down there, just kind of like pouring into the Gulf of Mexico. This happens at most mouths of most rivers around the world, especially those coming out of industrialized countries. So we are directly connected, but it still feels kind of abstract, right? It's like, well, that's down there, you know, and it's, you know, when you look at the water, it's not going to be red. It's just going to be sort of empty when you get in the water. But for some folks, it's not abstract at all. So this is a shot from an area along the Mississippi between Baton Rouge and New Orleans called Cancer Alley. Very high, huge number of oil refineries, plastic production sites, chemical production sites, and everything used to make all these things puts out a lot of pollution. It goes into the air, goes into the groundwater. The people there have the highest level of cancer based on air pollution in the whole country, 50% more than anywhere else in this country. Most of the people living there are black and brown, poor, and classic example of environmental injustice. And so one good thing though is folks there are starting to organize, they're starting to push back, so they are winning in courts, winning court battles, and that's encouraging, that's really great. But like I said, not abstract at all. It's like, it's affecting people's families, their lives, people are dying because of this sort of production. So I started thinking, okay, I think I got an idea of what I want to do. I think I want to make a big plastic blue whale, a blue whale out of recycled plastic, basically a blue whale out of garbage, you know? We'll figure out a way to have lots of people contribute to it, so it's kind of a crowdsourced way of building the whale. And I was like, God, I don't know if I've ever heard of something like that before, and I started digging around, and like, yeah, plenty of people have done it. So here is one that was done in Taiwan. This is a group called Studio KCA, based in Brooklyn. They organized a bunch of local volunteers. They went through the rivers, on the beaches of Taiwan. They gathered all this plastic. And then they got some local engineers, and they made this life-size whale 7 stories high. And kind of great. I think that's a beautiful idea. Now here's the trick. They did another version of this. The first one they did was in Bruges, in a river in Bruges, Brussels, in Europe. But the thing there is they collected all the plastic in Hawaii. and then flew it to Brussels. So if you're doing a piece that is kind of got a little bit of an activist edge to it, there's a lot of bases to cover. And so if you're doing a piece that's about carbon footprints, maybe it's not a great idea to be flying all this plastic from Hawaii all the way across the world. But I feel like they learned something. The next one they did was all local. They worked with local folks, and I think that's good. They adjusted. So how about recycled plastic? Now, I don't know about you all, but for me, it's always been this thing of like, if I have to drink a bottle of water and I put it in the little recycle bin, I think, oh, good, I did something. It's not even, oh, good, it's more like I feel less guilty, you know? This is just me. So, but reading a little bit more about it, it's like, well, actually, no. 75.5% of it goes directly into landfill. 16% incinerated, goes right up into the air. And almost 9% is recycled, so that's good. But it's recycled into products that can't be recycled, so will end up in landfills or incinerated. So basically, in the life of the plastic, it's not a good thing. It's not great. Granted, there's plenty of good things about plastic, but there's a lot of bad things. We'll get to some more bad things soon. But all this doom, right? Oh my God, I don't want to hear it anymore. So, how about something else? Spectacle. This is a group called Royal Deluxe, a theater company based in Europe. You can see on the very top there's a guy up there, and he's operating the trunk of the elephant. The elephant's trunk is swinging back and forth, and it's spraying steam and water on the audience. Right in the middle. Right up there. There's 3 people there. 3 people there, and they're operating the legs, and this 3 to 4 story elephant, this mechanical, is walking slowly through the city. Amazing. Going to walk and meet this little girl, this little 35-foot tall girl who's being operated by these Lilliputian puppeteers. You find the video for this on YouTube, wherever, there's some beautiful stuff. It's very, watching the puppeteers make her move, there's some versions of this where it's very athletic, very gymnastic choreography of how they're jumping and pulling on these ropes, and the ropes are lifting her leg, and she's walking slowly through the city to meet the elephant and her papa. Right there. And he's kind of like a deep sea diver, and he's crawled out of the harbor, and gone to meet his daughter and the elephant. And for me, I still get a little bit of tingly and kind of like this little kid feeling like, oh my God, giants walk the earth, amazing. And I think that is a good thing. I think that's something that art can do. It can like give a little breath to all the stuff we're feeling kind of like bound by. Just a little bit of moments where it's like there's something that you couldn't imagine is possible. And letting that be, and letting that spark live a little bit, and I'm inspired by that a lot. Brian Yeoman is a First Nations artist out of British Columbia in Canada, and he built these white plastic, these whale skeletons are built out of white plastic lawn chairs, right? Now at first that might seem like kind of a gimmick, you know? Get an idea of how big it is with a woman standing here. It's probably like 30, 35 feet long. And so on the surface, it's like, oh, okay, white plastic lawn chair. So what? Well, if you let yourself go a little bit further, so plastic is made of oil, right? Oil takes a very long time to produce itself. So we're talking about geologic time. Similarly, you can talk about geologic time for how long a white plastic lawn chair is going to take to break down. But you can also talk about like the speed and the ease and the comfort and the quickness and the throwaway consumer culture that a white plastic lawn chair kind of represents. You just go buy one for a couple bucks, and there you go. You can throw it out whenever you want. So this combination of speed and forever. So, you know, those lawn chairs are going to last way longer than all of our ages put together. And so thinking about material and its history and the stories of the material and how that comes together in these different pieces, I think that's that's interesting too. Okay, what plastic pollution, why does it matter? For whales, it matters a lot because this is what they get entangled with. This is one of the main reasons they die these days, is what they call ghost nets. So most of the nets now used by fishermen and fishing fleets is polyester plastic. So you get these drift nets that will be 25 to 50 miles long. They might get separated from the fleet, and then all of a sudden this thing is just floating out there. And whales are mammals, right? So they gotta breathe, they gotta get their blowholes to the air so they can breathe. They get tangled up in these nets, then they're slowly dragged down. It's exhausting to keep getting to the surface, and so they end up drowning. So very important for that. Microplastics, maybe some of you guys have been hearing about this. When plastic breaks down, it breaks into these tiny little micro bits that you can't see with the naked eye, but you can see with a microscope. It's starting to show up in living systems, in bodies. Recently they were finding microplastics in the bloodstreams of newborn babies, newborn humans. When plastics are made, they're made with all kinds of different chemicals to kind of bring it all together. When they break down, those chemicals are released. And those chemicals, again, forever chemicals, do all kinds of things. Endocrine disruptors, they do reproductive problems, developmental problems, behavioral disorders, cancer. Whew, not so great. So this big whale, we're gonna build it, put it up in this big stock pavilion. That's where we did elephant. You saw the clip there. And it's going to be 100 feet long, and we've been doing these workshops. We're gathering plastic. So let's talk about that for a second. At first it was going to be like a big whale skeleton. That was getting dicey, couldn't figure that out. It was going to be rough. So we ended up going with the skin. Think about the skin of the whale. And I wanted to get to a point where everybody's contributing something, like an old barn raising. So rural communities used to do this thing where instead of one person just building the barn over many, many months, get everybody in the village to come and contribute over a weekend, just put that sucker up just in a couple of days because everybody's helping. So how to contribute bits of material to make this big whale. A lot of different people down in Champaign-Urbana are working on this. So we ended up landing on the idea of pointillism. So if you think of painting with pointillism, George Seurat, George in the Park. So you got the dots of color that make up a landscape or that make up like a portrait, right? So let's think of that for sculpture. Little dots of material that make up the sculpture. So this tube is made out of suspended bits of rock. This vortex, the columns, they're stationary, but they're floating, and those are suspended bits of charcoal. Here's a more commercial application. Nike hired this design team to make this 4-story tall soccer player for the 2010 World Cup. It's at a shopping mall. It's made out of 3,000 soccer balls. So instead of soccer balls, how about recycled water bottles or soda pop bottles, right? Get many hundreds, couple of thousand, and build the skin of the whale out of these different water bottles. So there's been this, over the last year, kind of been doing all these workshops with high school classes, college classes, and talking about plastics and oceans, how we're connected to them, connected to whales, and making these little, you can kind of think of them as very small little sculptures, and that's building up the whole whale. We're running into all kinds of different difficulties and needing to shift and adjust, so it's not going to look like that, but we're kind of needing to deal with a lot of engineering, which has been tricky. So we're figuring it out. It's going to be part of this big performance at the end of September and the very early part of October. So what I'd like to do now is I want to read you guys a couple of sections from the performance, it's kind of in progress, and then we'll have a little bit of time for some questions. So, okay, here we go. Before we set sail, we gotta take care of some basics. In the rare event that our ship goes down, we need to be aware of a few simple instructions. Guidance that can aid you to get off the sinking ship or to eventual safety in the best condition possible. The time has passed when you can indulge in lethargy, where you can fiddle with a rope or two while you let George or Mary do it. When a torpedo hits, or maybe you're struck by a tornado, a hurricane, wildfire, flash flood, rising sea levels, insurrection, storm of barren warheads, opioid addiction, softball-sized hail, communal wave of suicide, microplastics, pandemic, ice storm, heat stroke, pyrocumulonimbus cloud-induced weather patterns, cluster munitions, or of course, thunder, snow. George or Mary may prove to be even more panicked and less skilled in launching a lifeboat than you. It may be that they are depending on you to get them safely off the sinking vessel. Of course, it's important to understand exactly when you should abandon ship. Many vessels have everything you need, and if you keep your wits about you, use a little common sense and take care of her, she'll take care of you. The ability to conserve your resources and adapt to changing conditions will determine your success. Now, ships are built for buoyancy. Many compromised vessels can be salvaged, but there will be no salvaging the two messmen on the torpedo tanker Republic who were drowned when they jumped overboard from a ship that did not sink. No rescue for the Penn, Massachusetts sailors who launched a lifeboat into a burning oil slick. On January 17, 1942, the Norwegian freighter Nyholt was torpedoed in the North Atlantic. For 9 days, 24 survivors were in an open boat. On the 8th day, heavy spray covered the boat with an inch-thick layer of ice. 22 survivors wore life suits. The two not using the suits were the captain and second mate. The captain died of exposure. Second mate had had both legs amputated on account of frostbite. You see, with preparation, we can survive. If you are in good health, you can live without food for as long as 60 days, but if you have no water supply, do not eat. If the human body is deprived of water for a few days, digestion will stop and toxic waste will accumulate rapidly. When deprived of water, a person in good health will start to become delirious in about 4 days. Death will occur in 8 to 12 days, but at sea, the shorter time is more likely. And what you're about to hear is the result of open boat experience in the time of stress, danger, and sudden death. You will not be listening to armchair theory. You will be hearing lessons learned from climate catastrophe, folklore, scientific study, and the survivors of sunken ships. Let's take a moment to imagine the moment. There you are, standing at the edge of a severely listing deck. You've studied, you've drilled, you are as well prepared as anyone, and you've determined that your chances of survival will dramatically increase if you abandon your sinking ship. And let's be clear, there is no doubt the ship is going down. You're wearing your life suit, check. You have a watertight belt of food and a full canteen strapped to your waist, check and check. Maybe you've got a sextant, a watch, a compass, charts, and a knowledge of the stars. Good for you. And perhaps you've got an E-PER, that's right, an emergency position indicating radio beacon. It's hard to imagine a better prepared sailor. It's time to move. You climb down the rope, lower yourself into the water. You swim to the lifeboat, avoiding the sheets of flame and the sharks. You are pulled aboard. You are warm and dry. With your mates, you row your lifeboat away from the sinking ship's danger area. It may take some time for your heart rate to stabilize. You got food, you got water, but it's not going to last forever. Sure, it's great that you weren't burned alive or ripped limb from limb by blood-crazed sharks, but probably best to stay in the moment. So as you sit in your lifeboat, be wary, be vigilant, but don't panic. There's power in transformation. Stay focused on the positive in your stiff upper lip. Keep a smile on your face, a song in your heart as you float your boat on the sea, the deep blue sea. And always remember, survival is insufficient. He sat on a rocky beach, an exhausted, naked, handsome young man, his shoulder full of shot, only a left-handed red mitten to his name. A young woman found him. She gave him her sweater, and she swam out to sea. Well, he found himself, trapped in the sweater. He decided he wouldn't fight it. He'd just be human. He lived the life of a fisherman. So he'd go down to his rocky beach from time to time. No one knew about this beach. It was his beach. He would sit among the rocks and collect his thoughts. Sometimes he would wear his red mitten to remind himself of where it came from. This seemed to be his life. But one day, he found this enormous mermaid on his beach. He tucked himself out of sight and observed the mermaid. Maybe she was a selkie. She seemed to be mostly whale, a little bit seal, and just a hint of human lady. She took up the whole beach. He remained hidden, came up with a plan, and he realized he needed a distraction. He hurried into town, stepped into the pub, and made an announcement. He said, "There's a milk wagon selling ice cream. It's a milk wagon with beautiful, friendly young people. The ice cream is delicious and not expensive at all. Oh, and they're giving away free beer to the first 20 people who show up. As a promotion. It's all just south of here." Well, the pub emptied. Everyone walking south for ice cream and beer. The man walked north, back to his enormous mermaid. As he walked down the lane through the green turf, he saw the back of a huge head that rose up above the edge of a cliff. He dropped to his belly and crawled out to the edge, looking down onto the secret rocky beach, just in time to watch the 75-foot mermaid step out of her whale seal skin. She stepped out of it like a lady stepping out of her dress. The giant naked woman carefully arranged, smoothed, and folded the skin. She folded it. She folded it once. And the woman slowly dropped from 75 feet to 50 feet tall. She folded the skin again. She became 25 feet tall. She folded and folded and shrank, and there she was, 5'5", stark naked on a rocky gray beach. She seemed to have folded her skin into a kind of case. Let's call it a valise. She took a bar of soap out of the valise and sat in a tide pool. She bathed for a little while, but she wasn't satisfied, so she reached back into the valise and pulled out a pair of knitting needles and a ball of red yarn. Yes, that's what she needed. She sat in the tide pool knitting. She was content. Meanwhile, the man snuck down the switchback cliff path. He scooped up the valise, held it to his chest, and confronted her. "Marry me," he said. She did not say yes. She answered with clicks, whistles, and moans, and finally silence. And suddenly, the man realized that now he could pull the sweater off. Trapped no more. He was glad to be free of it. He pulled the sweater over his naked fiancée and took her back to the pub. The villagers had all returned, but knowing that they couldn't find the milk wagon with the ice cream and the beer. Wrapped in the man's enormous sweater, the young woman sat at the bar knitting, ignoring the people. The man said, "My friends, I'd like you all to meet my sweet fiancée." And the people said, "From where does she come? What's your name, lass?" "Oh, she's shy," said the man. "Give us a song," said the people. "Yes, tell us a story," said the folk. She concentrated on her knitting. It looked like she was making a mitten. It became clear that stories and songs would not be forthcoming. Everyone in the pub was getting, angry. No ice cream, no beer, and now a silent stranger knitting a goddamn mitten. "Who do you think you are?" they cried. "Yeah, you and whose army?" they shouted. The villagers started moving toward the young woman and the man. They were going to attack them. The man said, "Oh, come on, my friends, really?" He helped the woman into the ladies to escape the press of the mob. To calm everyone down, he told his famous pirate jokes. Everyone listened. No one laughed. They just liked to hear the jokes. They said, "Tell us one about the alphabet." "Okay. Why does it take pirates so long to learn the alphabet?" "We don't know. Why?" "Because they spent so many years at sea." "Oh, man, this is good. Tell me one about the cinema." "Have you heard about the new pirate movie?" "No, we haven't. It's rated R." "Oh, man, it's good. Tell me one about the steering wheel." "Okay. Pirate walks him into a bar. He's got a big ship steering wheel sticking out of his pants. Bartender says, my friend, you got a steering wheel sticking out of your pants." And the pirate says, "Avast, this wheel is driving me nuts." I'll take that home. Meanwhile, the little girl saw the young woman's valise. While the man told his joke, she took the valise into the ladies and handed it to the young woman. The young woman smiled and handed the little girl the red mitten she just finished knitting. Then she stripped off the huge heavy knit sweater and climbed out the window. She carried her valise as she walked naked down the lane back to the rocky beach. She opened the valise, slowly unfolded her skin as she grew bigger and bigger. She stepped back into her skin, all 75 feet of it, and she swam back out to sea. Back in the pub, the little girl brought the sweater and the mitten to the man. He saw the sweater and mitten. His heart stopped. The man said to the girl, "Where is she?" The little girl shrugged. The villagers were annoyed by the interruption. "Tell us some more jokes," they said. "Yes, sing us a shanty," they implored. But the man ignored them. He burst into the ladies, the window wide open, the young woman gone. He pulled the sweater over his head, his pair of mittens onto his hands. The man ran out the door and down the lane. The villagers followed. Why not? They didn't get ice cream or free beer, and this seemed exciting. Maybe not exciting, but it was certainly different. They followed the man as he ran through the village, out towards the sea. They followed him down the narrow path to the edge of the cliff. The villagers watched him scramble down the switchbacks, down to the secret rocky beach, the beach they'd never seen before. They watched the man push his tiny rowboat out into the surf. A blind man said, "Tell me what you see." A woman said, "He's rowing his boat." Another woman said, "He's crying third woman said, "He's crying because she's left him." And the blind man said, "Why did she leave him?" And the women said, "She did not love him. The sea is her home." They watched the man settle his oars into the tiny boat. They watched him stand up, the boat rising and falling. They held their breath as the man pulled off his heavy knit sweater. He folded the sweater. He smoothed the sweater. He carefully placed it on his small rowing bench. And then he kicked off his boots. He pulled off his shirt and his pants. He pulled his bright red mittens tight onto his fists. And he dove into the sea. "Oh no," cried the villagers. "Surely not wonderful." They clenched their fists to their mouths. They covered their eyes because they knew that the sea was cold. The sea was dark because they knew that they would never see him again. Thanks, everyone. If you got any questions, I'd love to hear.
First of all, a round of applause.
You guys got any questions? Yeah.
How do you determine what animal you're going to choose and what letter you're going to choose? Do you work on different animals and different letters, or do you complete an entire project and then move on to a different animal and letter?
Sometimes things get overlapped. Like when I did Tiger, I was kind of in the middle of working on Bear and been thinking about doing a tree project for a really long time. So there's not really any rhyme or reason. Kind of jumping around the 6 performances we've done. It's not going ABC. It's jumping around. So with this one, I was looking forward to doing something about the ocean. So, but then reading this book just kind of and then I end up kind of there's a certain thing that happens with the immersion of it that's really fun. So it's a good question. Thanks. Yeah.
So I don't know if you said this, but what got you started into all of this?
The whole project. Well, it's probably because I grew up. My dad was he's still around. Natural resources management and a wildlife biologist, ornithologist. And if you really want to get gritty and Freudian about it, I'm probably just trying to get his attention. So so I really felt like there's something about most of my big feeling out of my body sort of moments have been either watching live performance or being in a natural space with by myself. And so I felt like those two things are both kind of endangered. I feel like certain kinds of live performance is pretty rare for me anyway, and those moments in the wild are rare too. So I felt like, and most of the things I was writing and making always had an animal in it. So it's kind of I think this could sit within this big frame, this big way of, and I don't know about you all, but I feel like if I really look into something really deeply, you go through this what seems like a tiny door, but then everything opens up through that study and looking at that one thing. So, something like that. Yeah. Yes?
What made you decide to use a general term like wolf versus a very specific type of wolf that is endangered?
That's a great question. Yeah, like monkeys, there's over 100 different species of monkeys. So it's kind of like using the idea of, fairy tale categories. So, it's the big bad wolf. It's not the big bad gray wolf from, northern Alberta. So and I think that's part of it is kind of and this is all, this is one of the first questions I get is can I bring my kids? A lot of people think these are sort of shows made for kids, and they're not. Kids can come, but there's some pretty adult ideas in it. So I think it's a way of just kind of connecting to our own sort of dreamscape, our own sort of growing up with animals as kids, where you might not know that it's a particular kind of bird, you know, but it's a bird, you know. So I think it's related to that. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. How do you go about making these stories regarding your shows or the story that you just told to us to promote the citation? Like, how do you come up with these stories?
I do a lot of reading. I go and visit places where the animals live. I talk to people that are working with the animals specifically, like biologists, and then I end up writing a lot, and I look at a lot of folklore. I look at the way the animals show up in our cultures in all kinds of different ways. And thinking about how those kind of ways are starting to fall away because people aren't spending as much time. And it used to be, everybody used to spend a lot of time with animals because you were just out in the world a little bit more, and now is not so much. So, yeah, I mean, it's also just kind of going through memories, starting with memories of these different creatures, small memories that I might have of any sort of connection with these different, and it might not even be in the wild, it might just be watching TV, or, you know, where have I ever had an experience like you might see, some underwater photography of whales, on Discovery or National Geographic or something like that. I've never done that. But kind of being there with that, reading more about it, hearing about people talk about who have done this sort of thing. So I, again, spent a couple of years making these things, and one idea is the idea of throwing the net really wide and keeping it open for as long as possible, and then finally looking for a spine, and then starting to connect these different stories to that spine, and things, some drop away and some stay, and slowly build something. Yeah.
Okay, when I look at this, I say the symbol is the whale, but the message is the plastic. So when you were doing the tiger, the wolf, the elephant, is your message the disappearing environment?
It's probably a bunch of things. I think with the bigger shows, there's a lot of different things that you could find different threads that kind of combine. I think with Tiger, it was probably about there was about climate change in Tiger. Elephant, not really sure what elephant would be. That's a good question, and I could give me a beat and I'll send it to you. But off the top of my head, wolf was probably about the idea of a trophic cascade, where one animal can end up being kind of like a keystone species that can really determine the health. If a particular animal, like a keystone animal, is in a particular habitat, that means that that habitat is healthy enough that it's able to support all these other kind of life. And if the animal is not able to live there, that means something is broken in there. So that was probably a thing in there, or thinking about Yellowstone and reintroducing wolves there, and then using that idea and taking it to a very small little park in central Illinois, Allerton, and kind of using this sort of dark humor, well, we're here, let's try it in Allerton. And we told people that we had released wolves in this 4 square mile park, and there's still people in East Central Illinois that believe there are wolves in Allerton. So it depends on the show, but I think more and more it's becoming more and more about climate change, more and more about biodiversity stopping, and trying to find ways of sounding the alarm without depressing everybody in the room. Okay. Yeah.
Especially just off of this talk, I can see that you're working with so many different mediums. There's performance, sound, video. You're doing storytelling, speech. How do you, with these kind of culminating art experience events, how do you organize and synthesize all of that that's happening?
It's It's a great question. It's a reason I'm not sleeping very well right now. I mean, I think in some ways the model might be a few models, but you might think about the collaborative work of like making a film, collaborative work of making a theater piece. It's a little wonky because I don't have training in making a big collaborative film or making a big theater piece. And so working with theater people, they can be a little confused because theater people end up usually like, we all wear our one single hat, and with these shows, you wear a bunch of different hats. And so a lot of times it's just gathering people who are, there's some really talented people that work on them, and it's really nice to, I mean, I can do a bunch of different things, but it's so nice to be able to find somebody who's very good at what they do and trust them and know that they're probably going to make something better than I could do by myself. And so finding ways of finding those folks, developing the trust, and at a certain point just letting them do what they do, you know. But I think you're onto something there for sure. It's like I like all the different textures of these different mediums and making these sort of immersive events that, you know, where it gets your mind going, but then you can be really emotional too. And so using the strengths of some of those different mediums to make those moments, that's the hope anyway. And not that it's always successful, but sometimes I think it is. Yeah.
Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. It's almost 2. So if you have some more questions and you want to come up and chat with Deke individually, you're cool? Let's do that. The rest of you, if you have to head out, that's fine too. But thanks everybody for taking the time to be here today. And thank you, Deke.